I remember having that moment of hope where when you realize what Bitcoin is, you're like, oh my God, now it can be stolen from. And people are like, where are they stealing from me? Because they're printing money into infinity.
There's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve, and there is no reserve. Right? It's literally a conglomerate of privately owned banks that create the money and lend it to the treasury of the government of the United States. I mean, that sounds crazy, right? It's crazy.
They're devaluing the thing that you work for. Every time you get that paycheck, $1,100 that you get paid is no longer worth the $1,100 of a week ago. It's no longer worth of a month ago, much less a year ago. If you save in fiat for the past 90 years, it devalued itself by like 98%, right? Banks are printing money out of thin air, willy-nilly, stuffing their pockets, and everyone who's around them, their family and friends who is around the money spigot, they just turn on the money spigot. They give us the crumbs that we get from the floors. The 8 billion people get the crumbs. All of a sudden, people are gonna be like, enough is enough. People, one by one, are gonna say, I choose Bitcoin.
Hey there, I want to ask you for a quick favor. Over the past few months, I've had over 50,000 returning viewers and listeners to this podcast, but over 65% of you haven't subscribed yet. So if you enjoy what I'm doing and you find my content valuable, please subscribe on YouTube or follow me on your favorite podcasting platform. This will help me fuel the algorithm and spread the message on Bitcoin even further. I really appreciate your support. Now let's dive into this episode. All right, Gus Boldrini, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Thank you for having me, brother. I always listen to your show. I enjoy it because you have so many different guests from all walks of life, and it helps me go about my day and work. And it's amazing when you're listening to something, you can actually focus even harder in the task that you're doing and still absorb all that information. So I learn about Bitcoin and have fun at work whenever I'm listening to you, like in Robin say you're on the podcast too.
Yeah, man, it's still wild to hear that. I think it's just really cool what you can do on the internet. So yeah, thank you for that. I'm happy to have played a little role in your Bitcoin journey. And I agree. I listen to a lot of Bitcoin podcasts like in the gym, and I feel it's a good kind of like a good distraction for your mind. Like you're just listening to it and you're acting, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it's also very productive. Actually, I think lots of people probably wouldn't find that productive, but I agree with that. So yeah, man, I'm happy you're here. I think we got in touch on Twitter X, like you shared that you were listening, and then later I saw that you posted a video which was titled "Is Everyone as Obsessed About Bitcoin Like I Am?" And I think that, I don't know how many views that got, but I think it did really well. It's you driving in your car. I love those videos. So, for the people listening, go follow Gus.
Thank you.
See him rant in his car. But I think I replied to that like, you're definitely not alone. But I think it's fun that you ended up there. But I wanted to start with the question, how did you become so obsessed with Bitcoin?
Well, I remember my childhood friend came over to my house in spring of 2021, and we made a pact or a vow to each other that we're going to download Robinhood, start buying $100 of nothing crazy, just $100 of stocks every single week together. So we were going to retire early, hopefully in our 45s and 50s. And then one day I saw this thing that moved ridiculously, like from $10,000 to like $64,000, and that was Bitcoin. And I'm like, what is this? I've heard about this somewhere. And I remembered I was working in the pizzeria back when I was like 18, 19, and I saw this on television, and I'm like, I wasn't presumptuous to say, that's stupid, that's a scam. I was just like, what is that about? And then I remember just forgetting all about it for like a decade, or not a decade, like half a decade. And then one day I'm in Robinhood, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to buy some of this, and I'm going to research it a little bit. And then unfortunately, I got into all that shitcoin scams, and I got wrecked like everybody does. I got wrecked with thousands of dollars. And thankfully, Bitcoin has made that all up again. And I sold everything for Bitcoin. And it's been a really fun adventure, because once you find out what Bitcoin is, once it clicks in your head, the love and dedication that you have for it, it's never enough information. You're going to be listening to all types of podcasts. I'm still productive. Obviously, I work 60, 65 hours a week, and, I'm mowing the lawn and I'm gardening and I'm doing other stuff, my side hustle with my wife and my mom. And I'm just listening. I'm cleaning houses, cleaning offices, and just listening to podcasts and taking that information. And then sometimes you hear new information about Bitcoin and it clicks again. It's always that clicking epiphany moments. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh my God, Bitcoin is amazing. You have to stop and just ponder and say, Bitcoin is amazing. It's finally solving the age-old question of the monetary tool that's been manipulated by tyrants for thousands of years.
Yeah. So how do you explain that? Or maybe how did that click for you, this last part that you said, right? Because I think, you can listen to podcasts, or you can go online or follow people, or just find factual information about like how Bitcoin works. But that doesn't mean you understand why it has a right to exist, and I think that is a question around what is money, how does that work, etc. How did that part go for you, and what made it click for you?
I remember being a kid and having moments where you learn and the universe just has you in awe, and you can't help but be amazed at the wonders of life and the universe. I first remembered, and it ties into how I got into Bitcoin. I first remembered how I was in my grandfather's kitchen and he was peeling me like an apple or an orange. I don't remember. And I'm like, Grandpa, because I heard there was a funeral in my family. I was like, Grandpa, am I going to die one day? And he's like, yeah, but that's okay. We're going to live a long life. And then one day we finally return to God. And so I remember just having that moment of like, oh my God, I'm going to die one day. And then after that, as a kid, you keep thinking about these things and they click in your head that, this is life and what the world around you is. And I remember thinking, if we keep burying people in burial grounds, theoretically, one day we're going to run out of burial ground space, right? Because more and more people are going to be born, more and more people are going to die. And then I remember just going into like a deep anxiety about that. And then the thing that ties into Bitcoin is that one day I remember using a paper note to buy some candy at a store. And I remember being like, who makes these? Can't I make them? Can't I just make them and just use my own money? And I remember the non-explanation I got from family members. They were like, oh, that central banks issue it and they know what to do and it's usually backed by gold. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's backed by gold. And then come to find out, and you don't think about these things, in your teenage years, in your 20s, even though you're hustling, you're working hard, you're living paycheck to paycheck, you got to pay your rent. If you don't pay your rent, they're going to kick you out, right? If you don't pay your electric bill, they're going to turn off the electricity. If you don't pay your water bill, so on and so forth. And so you have to struggle so much to work for this piece of paper that somebody else gets to print. That's where Bitcoin got me. I'm like, wait a minute. You cannot have a Bitcoin. You cannot print a Bitcoin. You cannot make a Bitcoin unless you work for it or somebody willingly gives it to you or you mine it and you have to buy it, So I remember that it's fair. It's a fair system now for the whole world. It's, once you get into once you read the Creature of Jekyll Island, that's such a great book to just, it shows you how the central bank in the United States, the Federal Reserve, was made out of thin air. Behind closed doors without an actual vote from the American people. And that's just happening around the world. And these tyrants get to print the money. So that's not fair. So Bitcoin is that system that is uninflatable by banksters. It's unmanipulable by politicians. It's incorruptible by anyone. It's unstealable. It's amazing how you can memorize 12 to 24 words and your money is yours. You can travel across the globe anytime, with everything that you own.
Bitcoin custody is evolving. And while self-custody is important, it has its own risks and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your custody setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-signature vault, guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control. Your funds are fully auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Check out onrampbitcoin.com through the link below and schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team to get to know them and learn more about their offering.
Yeah, I love, of course, you listen to the podcast, but I love the example of when you are a kid, you just get the coins and you get a paper and you go to a store and then you get a bread, or, you give that and you get a bread or a lollipop. Like you never ever question it, right? Like it's like, oh, apparently this is how it works. But I think what is kind of saddening or perhaps maddening later when you realize that there's like a third party that influences that thing, that tool that you use to exchange value with each other and to express value, that is manipulated. Like how does that manipulate your life then eventually and all the choices that you make, right? Like the perception of freedom that you have. So I think that's a really great example. And then especially what you said when you ask your family members or they talk about the central bank, like, yeah, okay, but how does that work? Why do we agree? When did we agree to use this money, right? And I use the term or the terminology a lot, like fiat money is money that you're forced to use. Like you didn't adopt it, right? Like it's just like, oh, well, you live in this country, this is the money that you use. And then you think like, oh, okay. And then, as you said, you mold your entire life around the amount of money units that you have, without ever questioning what it is. And it's kind of sad. I do think that's sad that it takes us to our 30s to figure out, oh, this is actually what the money is, right? And I've been kind of like duped all my life in that sense. Like I've been misinformed or ill-informed or not even informed about what this thing is that I base a lot of decisions on in my life. At least that was that for me, where I just realized, okay, so I think I'm making choices, but they're constantly influenced by this third party that doesn't really care about my individual choices that I think are important for my life, right? So yeah, how did you approach that kind of like challenging your previous beliefs or dealing with the fact that you found new information and had to change your understanding and then compare that to the fact that you might have not had any understanding before?
Well, for me, it was, I've always been in search of truth, and I came to a very religious part of my life in my teenage years, and I got a little bit way too much into religion, and I got like very devout Christian, and I went down a rabbit hole that it's ironically just takes you to more questions, and the more you dig and the more questions you have. But anyways, for Bitcoin is nice because every answer that you get, it satisfies you. And then you ask more questions and it continues to satisfy, because Bitcoin is truth. It's the immutable truth in a ledger in cyberspace. There is no occult. There's nothing hidden. Everything is done transparently. So for me, coming to that truth it was very easy for me because I wasn't stubborn. If I'm the type of person where you tell me, Gus, the sky's blue, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And then, if it's something that I don't believe at face value, and you shouldn't believe everything that people tell you at face value, and you should always ask questions and ponder. But, I try to do some research and find out what it is for myself, and I form my own opinions. For Bitcoin, it was easy because all that information is open out there. I encourage everyone to please just type in your Google search bar or DuckDuckGo, whatever you use, type, what is Bitcoin? And start exploring different people explaining, different experts and different people from the Bitcoin space explaining what Bitcoin is, what it does, why it's a thing, why it was, engineered by Satoshi Nakamoto, though I don't think it's an invention. I think it's a discovery of digital scarcity. It was from the beginning of time, it was always meant to be kind of like the wheel or kind of like fire or kind of like channeling electricity or storing said power to later on use that electricity. And Bitcoin does that in a way that it's like vacuum sealed food. I love Sailor's analogy. It's vacuum packed food. And for example, if you're taking electricity or power across the state, you lose 5% of said electricity every like 5 miles or 10 miles that you go. That's what happened. I just don't quote me on the exact numbers.
Yeah, you cannot go further than 500 kilometers, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like 300 miles or something. Yeah.
And it makes sense because you lose some of that power with distance, right? Not Bitcoin. You can store it and you can just take it in your brain and you can travel across the world and still have everything that that you worked hard for, as opposed to the fiat system where, now with the central bank digital currencies, for those who don't know, it's a central bank issued currency. Already is happening in China, Nigeria, and other places. They have an expiration date and they tie it to your social credit score. So if you don't do exactly as their government says, the way they want you to do things, you lose that money. They can just take it from you out of thin air. And you may say, well, but I'm a law-abiding citizen, until you do something that they don't like. Maybe you're a Christian, maybe you're Jewish, maybe you're a Muslim. And everyone should have access to a sound monetary tool, just like everyone should have access to a car. It doesn't matter what you believe in, the color of your skin, your ethnicity, your language. Every human, it's the human right. You should have access to tools that you can use to better your life and feed your children and, work efficiently and build a shelter for your children and family. And no one should be able to take that away from you. But the central bankers can. I call them the central banksters because they're like gangster, they're a mafia. They're all interconnected worldwide. And it's not just one specific group of people. They're from many walks of life. It's just the institution itself. It's like an entity. For example, the other day you saw Federal Reserve Chairman Powell. The lady was like, hey, could the president ask you to quit? Even if he asks nicely, do you have to oblige? Do you have to abide by what the executive branch says? He says no. So people forget that it's a third party.
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve is not federal. It's a private entity, and they do not have any reserves. They don't have any gold. They don't have anything at all. They just print money out of thin air and lends it to the American people. So once you dig into that, it's not like digging into religion. I don't want to poke at anybody's nerve, but sometimes you dig into religion and you don't really find answers. It just leads to more questions. But with Bitcoin, you dig into Bitcoin and you find the answers, and that leads into more answers, which leads into more answers. It's an infinite rabbit hole of truth. Yes. So you get satisfied. You find the actual immutable truth ledger in cyberspace, and every transaction that you make is transparent for the whole world to see. And that's why governments love it, because, people who say that, criminals use it, drug lords use it. If they use it, the FBI loves it because they get caught right away because everything's transparent. They can tie it directly to your identity, which I think is a blessing other people don't like. There are privacy tools for those who are privacy oriented. Don't worry, there are privacy tools out there, that being built in layers. There are many other tools that you're going to be able to use from other third parties. They're also decentralized. But no one should have that ability to take things away from you willy-nilly like that. No matter who you are, everyone should be free and have liberty and be able to live their life as they choose, as long as they're not harming themselves or others.
Yeah, that's a very extreme statement nowadays, don't you think?
Right? It's crazy.
Weird. Yeah. That's so fascinating. I cannot comprehend that. But I think two things, maybe three, that I'd love to zoom in on is the fact that Powell just said no 2 times, right? They asked the same question 2 times. It's just like, is this not enough for you, the public, to realize that he means it? He's not a crazy guy or something. Like, he's like, no. And then if someone would, zoom in on that and be like, okay, well, why? I find it fascinating that we are kind of like moving towards that edge already. I kind of see like the I don't think Trump is the best candidate, but just like that him winning and just kind of like this pendulum swinging back. That question was asked like 2 days after the election, or 1 day after the election, I think. And so I think like, wow, are we moving? that seems like we're moving pretty fast towards the edge of asking questions until it becomes clear that you're not going to like the real answer, like that the real answer is kind of going to come out. And I think, like you said, there's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve, and there is no reserve. Right? It's literally a conglomerate of privately owned banks that create the money and lend it to the treasury of the government of the United States. I mean, that sounds fucking crazy, right? It's crazy. But it's really how it works. And I love how, and I think that's an interesting connection to what you said about the truth part. Like, we can say this because we are confident that we have something that we own that gives us kind of like the power to say it. I don't know if that makes sense, but like for some people, it might sound like, oh, that's crazy. They're talking about these things. But like, it's not even my opinion what I just said about the Treasury, or about the Fed. It's facts. So, I kind of feel like owning Bitcoin helps me to handle that messed up truth, if that makes sense. Because for some people, again, it will sound like, okay, that's a crazy thing. But that truth part, right? You said like Bitcoin is engineered truth. I think that's, or you said something like that I say engineered truth a lot. And I think that is a really interesting realization, right? So Bitcoin is just a system by itself. It just started at zero, right? There's this ledger of all the transactions and all the coins out there, etc. And within the system of Bitcoin, that is the truth. The truth doesn't really spill out of that system. There's nothing that is added to that ledger that we see as the truth. The ledger is so secured that only the right things get added to the ledger. And that is why it's engineered truth. So whenever you refer to Bitcoin or the base layer of Bitcoin, you are referring to a pure truth within that system, right? And so if that is the base layer, then anything that's built on top of that has to adhere to the truth of the base layer. Because if you, are on a layer 7 on Bitcoin, and you feel like something shady is going on, you can drill down, basically. You can go down all the way to the base layer and find if the truth is there or not, right? So you can keep people accountable. So if we're going to demand from BlackRock, show me the reserves, and they say, well, no can do, then there's no can do, basically.
Exactly.
Because we know that a truth exists. So if you avoid the truth, telling the truth, it doesn't even matter if you don't want to, like you have to, because it can be demanded of you. And I think that is very interesting, almost like social assurance or insurance. I don't know, that people get incentivized to behave with whatever they do on top of this base layer, because the base layer in its entirety is a truth. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And this is where actually I try to get people, not get them, but, explain to them what Bitcoin is. For those who are curious and solicit me to say so, I tell them, do you enjoy being lied to? Nobody likes being lied to.
Yeah.
Do you like to have your money in a safe place? Everybody wants that. And I tell them that Bitcoin is the most fair storage of value. Your money is going to be there and it's not going to go up or down. It's just the value in fiat. That's their issue. We value one Bitcoin as 100 million Satoshis. It's a very white, I like to look at it as a very white Billy moment, because now people have the freedom to store their hard work into something that they can save, or they can, spend right away. And it's something that is a fair system that's gonna make them more productive. I remember being very grumpy before I found Bitcoin. I was very, you work hard for something and you don't really see the fruits of your labor, and it gets devalued. When I found out why, your labor is essentially getting devalued every day, every time they print money out of thin air, you are basically, every time, your labor is worth less every time, because they decide to print money out of thin air. And it's a very black pilling moment. You get kind of like nihilistic and depressed. With Bitcoin, no, the money that you're putting in there every time it continues to grow every year. Just buy Bitcoin, wait at least 4 years, and it's guaranteed that your money is going to go up in value. Your labor is going to be worth more. Your time is precious in Bitcoin. That's the beauty of it too. I love.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to explain that is like why would Bitcoin go up? It's because, there's an organic movement, as in, more people are feeling inflation, more people are questioning the things that you mentioned, right? Like, oh, but why is this happening? Where does the money come from? Like, it's just a very slow process. But there is already a lifeboat. There's already another money system, basically. And people will go through a shitcoin phase. I mean, I had the same, right? But yeah, eventually, if you're curious enough, you will get here and you will move here towards Bitcoin, to a better money, a provably superior money, a provably superior store value asset, right? If you compare it to gold, for example. So that happens over time. And I think that is what you mean, right? So if I store my value in here, like, there's just going to be more economic energy. And that's the other thing I wanted to zoom in on. It's just being stored in, I visualize it as like a 3D cube that just doesn't grow. So it has a fixed size, right? 21 million little blocks that make up one big cube. And all this economic energy is getting poured into this cube, but the cube doesn't grow. So that is why the value of each, little part of each little Bitcoin goes up over time. But, I think we use a lot of like illustrations, visualizations, analogies, to describe not only Bitcoin, but also the benefits of Bitcoin, right, to people, or when we talk about it. And I think it's, we have to start explaining it more, right? Because the part where you mentioned energy, of course, I agree. I get into so many conversations where people are like, yeah, but there's no real like electric energy in the digital Bitcoin and this and that. And then I say, no, it's like a metaphysical concept. It's conceptual, right? You have to imagine that there's energy in your body that you can expend within your finite amount of time in your life. You choose to do that as an EMT. You choose to do that as a side hustle, or spending time and energy on your family or your house or whatever. So everything you do, everything you decide to do is an energy expenditure in a set of time, which is your productivity. So those are your scarcest assets. Literally your energy in time.
You can't gain it back, right? Every second that goes by in your life, because we have a finite, we're mortals, unfortunately. We don't live for 1,000 years. Even if you did live to 1,000 years, you're still running out of time every day.
Yeah.
So every second that goes by, it's precious to you. It's a moment that you can spend with your family. And they're just taking that away from you. Breedlove. I love, by the way, your podcast that you did with Breedlove was mind blowing.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that. I listened to it like 3 times, dude.
Oh, really?
And I still want to revisit it because there's so many like little golden nuggets there, And so I remember having that moment of hope where when you realize what Bitcoin is, you're like, oh my God, now it can be stolen from. And people are like, where are they stealing from me? Because they're printing money into infinity. They're devaluing the thing that you work for. Every time you get that paycheck, whether it's direct deposit or you physically get the paycheck in your hands, those $1,100 that you get paid, $1,100 that you get paid is no longer worth the $1,100 of a week ago.
Yeah.
It's no longer worth of a month ago, much less a year ago. If you save in fiat for the past 90 years, it devalued itself by like 98%, right? So you could buy a house for $20 back in the 20s, in the 1910s, 1920s. You could buy a whole house. That goes to show you that the dollar is just going to continue to be devalued. And people may say, hey, but it's 2024. It's a new generation. But we're going to go into the future. Our children, I feel like people sometimes are unable to think for the future, because we have children and our grandchildren are going to be suffering because the Federal Reserve printed all this money. What was it? $8 trillion printed from 2020 to 2024. That's 45% of all the dollars to have ever existed from the foundation of these United States. 45 to 48% of all the dollars to have ever existed. And they have to print more. Another printing is coming. And it's going to be like double that because of all the, and people, people, I feel like people have to go through their own kind of learning experience. Unfortunately, you wish you could shake people awake right away for their own good, because if they start buying Bitcoin now, the $10,000 of Bitcoin they might buy today, which is 1, 2, 3, that's like what, 6-7 million Satoshis, with the current price, even less, actually, maybe 6 million Satoshis. If they buy 6 million Satoshis today, it's maybe worth $10,000. Pardon my math. It's a little bit off. But those 6 million Satoshis one day are going to be worth more than $50,000 because of the Federal Reserve infinite money printing.
Yeah.
Their paper's worth nothing. It's backed by nothing. Bitcoin is backed by the laws of physics and thermodynamics. That's why I like to tell people. Sometimes I think people, as soon as you start talking about Bitcoin and your interests, I feel like they kind of zone out.
Quick question. If you have your Bitcoin in self-custody, where are you keeping your Bitcoin seed words? For me, there's only one way, and that's backing up my seed phrase with stamp seed. It's a single durable plate without any parts or materials. Stamp your words into solid titanium, which is fire-resistant, water-resistant, and built to last. Unlike etching or engraving, stamp seed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, making it easy for you to protect your generational wealth. Don't risk losing your seed phrase on paper. Get a stamp seed plate for unmatched protection. You can use code BRAM, that's BRAM, for 15% off at stampseed.com.
Like people, my coworkers.
I think it's because I'm a bit on this topic now. Like the fiat money makes you a nihilistic person, makes you a negative person, right? It's very hard to even what you just said, right? Like, oh yeah, I would love to shake people up. Like that sounds so fucking sketchy, dude. Like I would love to wake people up and get them onto Bitcoin, right? Like it sounds sketchy, and it's funny because it's still somewhere in our mind, and you're laughing, so you recognize what I mean. Like it's still somewhere in your mind. Just it's a negative outlook on something that in Bitcoin's case is put in front of you. It's math and physics. It's not you should listen to me and buy Bitcoin and blah blah. No, you can verify everything for yourself, right? And that is the paradigm shift. That is why it's so hard to grok. That is like, okay, I'm going to tell you about something. You don't have to believe me, but I'm really into it. I had a discussion. It's a little sidestep. I had a discussion today with some journalists on Twitter, like Dutch journalists, and they were like, "Yeah, but there's like you cannot be an expert and have a lot of Bitcoin and stuff." And I think that's so like. I consider myself a Bitcoin expert. If I would not have Bitcoin, like I'm not an expert. Like, what are you talking about? Like that would be so weird. No, anyway. So, but it's kind of like that. The negative outlook on when something is presented to you by someone who's genuinely interested and says, "Please do not believe me. Please do your own work. This is how it helped me." You cannot do anything more than that, right? But because you put something in front of them that they can literally verify everything of, comparing that to like the fiat money paradigm, and we talked about the Federal Reserve, you don't know how it works. You can read the book, but you still have no clue, right? Yeah. So there's no 100% verifiability, whereas with Bitcoin, you can get there. And that really gives you the opportunity to decide for yourself, should I adopt this thing or not? And those two things are so far away from each other. I think that it just sounds like such an undertaking or something to get people there. So it's just easier. I mean, we are all lazy, right? So it's just easier to dismiss something and then
Exactly. I'm very optimistic about the future because of Bitcoin, and I think it's inevitable that. Most people I think are good. I love people. I think most people are empathetic, sympathetic, loving, kind, generous, and people love truth. So it's inevitable that people are going to go and find Bitcoin and start buying Bitcoin and using Bitcoin in their daily lives to store their wealth, store their energy, and use it to transact with family and friends. I pay my kids. I don't know if you ever think of doing that, like for doing their chores. I pay my kids in Bitcoin. I have a Aqua wallet, which is great. and I pay them in Bitcoin for their chores. Like you get 50 cents for doing their laundry, and they get, 75 cents for doing dishes every day. And, it teaches them work ethics and stuff like that. But every time you're doing that, you're teaching them the actual value of money. And how I get people is that, when people go and vote for a politician, everyone knows that politicians lie all the time. They're very self-serving, self-centered, egotistical. They make empty and false promises. Well, they don't make false promises to the people who pay them, right? And campaign donations and, under the table dealings that's going on with them with Bitcoin. When they use Bitcoin, it keeps the politicians accountable to the people. How the government's supposed to be by the people, for the people, and of the people. That's the essence of the American Constitution. It's a government by the people, for the people, and of the people. And with the fiat Federal Reserve money, they can have their dealings in the dark with their cash and dark money that, like the Pentagon just couldn't account for ridiculous amounts of money. That's just one tiny example of a billion other examples of politicians getting bribed and paid, and allegedly, but it happens all the time. But if we enforce Bitcoin as a worldwide currency, every single transaction is going to be publicly in the ledger, which is going to make the politicians actually work for you. Yeah. And if they're not providing good services, you just leave their jurisdiction or vote for a different candidate. So Bitcoin keeps people accountable, to the people that they're actually supposed to serve.
Yeah. Yeah, to tie that in with the last part of the energy that I mentioned, so because the energy is it's more like a concept, right? So you have also the politicians that do work, they expend energy, right? And you get rewarded in something that represents, is like an abstract of that energy. And one of my big realizations was when I listened to a podcast by Aubrey Marcus. So I mentioned that in the Breedlove thing too, but once you realize that everything around you costs energy to create or maintain, then you kind of like get that connection with money being an abstract, because, to create or maintain something, we use money to reward the people that do that for us. I mean, you clean houses, literally, right? So you literally expend your energy in certain hours of time. You create value, clean house, clean office, etc., and you get an amount of units for that work. And you put it into Bitcoin probably, but I think the idea is that once you realize that your reward is deteriorating over time, it's a bad reward. Then you are not incentivized to do your best work. And that's why it's inevitable. That counts for everyone, right? Exactly. That counts for politicians, cleaners, EMTs, whatever.
For everybody, right? Yes. It changes incentives. Humans work on incentives. If people are incentivized to do bad things, they're going to do those bad things. If people are incentivized to, I get paid money, right? And I immediately, my monthly expenditures are about maybe $2,100, $2,200 every single month. Whatever I have that's a surplus, and I always have a surplus because I try to work hard, I put it into Bitcoin. Every surplus that I have is in Bitcoin. And it might seem silly. Oh, it's just 50,000 Satoshis. Oh, it's just 100,000 Satoshis. Yeah, but with time, in Portuguese, they say, grain by grain, the chicken fills up its stomach and its croup, grain by grain, the tiny little grains, but all day packing the dirt, eventually the croup gets filled up and they have a big belly and they lay the eggs, right? So grain by grain, it's doable, and it makes your perspective and your view of the world so much more beautiful. And I remember there's an epidemic of people being depression, anxiety. People are more medicated than ever in America. And it's because of the incentives. People, after I found Bitcoin, man, I'm telling you, I wake up happy. I'm so thrilled and excited every single day. I tell you, my bones are starting to hurt because, people say age, but no, it's because of your spirit. Like it's your mentality. It's your energy. If you're sad and depressed and anxious all the time, you're going to be afraid and life's going to suck and you're not going to want to live. That's how people get, ideations of doing bad things to themselves and others. So when you're happy, when the human's happy, the whole world is bright and everything around you is bright. So Bitcoin is the bright orange future. Once you study Bitcoin and you find out what it is, you're going to be so happy. You go to bed happy. You wake up happy. And during the workday, people are like, why are you so nice, Gus? Why are you so nice? I'm like, because I want to tell them, but sometimes because people say, oh my God, you're in a cult. No, it's Bitcoin. First of all, Bitcoin has no leader. Cults have leaders, right? And
we
also,
tell you to not listen to us, please. Like, do
exactly.
verify it for yourself, please. Yes,
exactly. And Bitcoin is all about freedom and liberty, right? Most Bitcoiners are all libertarians, like I am. You know, a lot of Bitcoiners are people who are very liberty, and they tell you right away, you do whatever you want. You know, I can't tell you what to do. I can't tread on you. So it's all about freedom and liberty. So it's definitely the reason why Bitcoin changes your world and makes you so happy is because you know that you're working for a brighter future. You know that the future is going to be bright. To tie in what you said about, you know, to make a table, that takes energy. You know, humans eat. The whole point of eating is that we get those calories, our stomach absorbs them and produces ATP, adrenotriphosphate. ATP is the energy that our muscles use to, in our brains and our tissues, the cells in our body uses it to make you move, to make you think. Even thinking, you're spending calories and ATP. Anything, walking, riding a bike, building a house, everything is energy. The entire universe is energy. Once you realize that, and people are like, oh, Bitcoin is nothing, it's backed by nothing. Bitcoin is backed by nothing. You're right. Bitcoin is the thing that backs everything. All the value in humanity, like the triangle that you shared the other day, it was mind blowing. I was like, where was I? I just remember being so amazed that gigantic triangle up here and the tiny 21 million triangle Bitcoins and the entire world's value, like what, 800 trillion plus of
something
assets worth, right? Yeah. Market cap coming into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin cannot get any bigger because there's no inflation in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is deflationary money. Yeah. So for those who don't know, there are 21 million Bitcoins forever. And maybe 3 million have been lost. So maybe there are 16, 17, 18. People debate about that, but there's very few Bitcoins. So if you own one Bitcoin, you own 1/21 millionth of everything in the entire world, because every Bitcoin is repricing everything. And when people are honest and people actually want a brighter future, they're going to save in something that, you know, that's why people buy stocks and bonds, because the stocks, you know, theoretically will rise in price, but now the people are finding out, are being more educated about, you know, their money. The whole money game is changing because now fiat is going to be soon extinct. Because humans love truth and they search for truth. Eventually, fiat is going to go extinct. Nobody's going to use fiat anymore. Everybody's going to opt out of fiat, you know, because why do they use fiat? Because it's more convenient. You know, with gold, you can't go to the store and shave your little gold with a little gold shaver, you know. Oh, here you go, bro. Take 5 ounces of gold for your car, you know.
Yeah, some dust for a lollipop.
It's undoable, you know, and then you invite violence. Thieves are going to come in and bonk you over the head. With Bitcoin, you can just transfer telepathically your money with the magic, you know, cube that we call, you know, a phone. And I can transfer value from me to you, or from you to me. I can transfer value to a guy in Japan right now, and he can provide me a value by building me a website or doing marketing for my business. It's truly amazing. Bitcoin is the next step in the evolution of human civilization. I highly think that, you know, the Kardashev scale, for those who enjoy looking at humanity and having hope for the future of humanity, the Kardashev scale is the level types of civilizations, you know, and we measure that by how we harvest energy and channel said energy, you know, and everything in the universe is channeled energy. I think that Bitcoin is going to take us to the next type civilization. Bitcoin is the key. That we're now opening the door, and more and more people are going to come in. It's truth. People always walk towards truth and good incentives, and Bitcoin is going to be the new. I've never been so certain about something my whole life.
Me neither. Yeah, I said once, if this ends up being like an NSA or CIA psyop, then my reaction will probably be like, okay, you got me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, well, that was very elaborate. If that's really, then okay, fine, you win, whatever. Just bring me to the gulag or something like that. That's so. But the energy part, I think, is interesting, right? Because what I like is that a lot of things that we use to again, these analogies or illustrations, etc., is also based on things that happened before. So any big innovation, technological innovation in our history has been a condensation of energy. So whether it's like the horses to steam engine to car to etc., right? Or information stored in heads on clay tablets, then in books, then printed to be distributed, right? So it's all condensation of energy. So you need less human energy or less horse energy to move the same amount of information or weight or whatever. That's the whole point of progression of technology. At least for me, that's how I frame it. Is like a condensation of information into a smaller package, so that more energy or more information can get distributed more, basically. Wow. So everything goes faster, cheaper, etc. Right? And we've done that, except with the money. We are calling right now in 2 different time zones, and it works flawlessly, and we're uploading all the things and stuff, and but with money, it just didn't happen. And I love what you said about I can pay a guy in Japan to make a website for me, and no bank or any intermediary can come in between. Of course, that's the most practical example, but I think to illustrate again that, like, okay, if you would do that now and you have a guy in Japan and a guy in the Congo and a guy in, the US, if they would do the exact same expenditure of energy in the same exact amount of time and deliver the exact same thing, depending on their reward, their currency, that human energy is valued in a different way. And that is the fucked up thing.
And devalued a lot of times,
and devalued.
Zimbabwe, whatever
exactly,
money Zimbabweans use.
So because your reward is stronger than my reward, my human productivity is valued less. That's weird, because that currency is a creation by other people. So it's not that the currency fell out of the air and it was just there. That's why more organic things like gold obviously were better in the past. But now, as we talked about before, this is an engineered money. It's perfectly engineered money. There's so many different specialties and already technological discoveries before they were combined into Bitcoin that are combined.
Oh yeah,
right. So
Bitcoin
it's not a random thing. Like this problem is an age old problem.
Age old problem.
And I think that's a good thing to know about, kind of like also the reason of existence of Bitcoin. Like, what is the backdrop? And there have been many people that have thought about, how do you create trust with unknown parties over a distance? What is the game theory of money? What is hard? What is soft money? All these things. And so, I love that you can constantly kind of like go broad and then narrow again, right? Like how we talk about Bitcoin. So I love that flow. I wanted to ask you about, because you said, like you learned about it, you dismissed it, you got back in, etc., and slowly over time, shitcoining. And you kind of mentioned the curiosity you had as a child, and I think that the it's not a skill. I think it's kind of like a trait, kind of like a personal trait. I don't know if you can acquire the skill of curiosity, but that comes back a lot. That personal trait of curiosity. Like how did you cultivate that? Like how do you become comfortable with curiosity? Because curiosity also kind of makes things that you are certain about in your life. You're questioning them constantly, right? Could be in a healthy way, but it also brings a bit of unrest in a sense. Like how do you cultivate your curiosity?
And it makes you kind of anxious, and you really want to have the answers to it, and you kind of live with it. I lived with it growing up, like not knowing, what the money was about. You kind of put it to the side, and you you grow up and you start your job and you work hard and you open a bank account and you find love and then you get married and you have children. And then you're like, whoa, I really love these tiny little people, like the children who came from me. I must provide them a better future than I had. Now, all those questions that you had way back when you were a kid, all of a sudden you need answers right now. So that was Bitcoin, the moment that I had the Bitcoin epiphany for me. I'm doing this for my children, right? Greg Foss says, for the kids, for the kids. It's because we need a brighter future. What the current system that we have was developed by the school of thought from a man known as John Maynard Keynes, for those who don't know. And in Keynes, it was a very nihilistic person. He used to say all the time, in the long term, we're all dead anyway, so whatever. What?
Yeah,
no.
that's wild.
In the long term, my kids are going to be here. Like, Bram and I are going to, one day go and pass on, but like everybody else, but our children are going to be here and they're going to be having children and those children are going to be having children. So how do we make that better future for our posterity, for the lineage, for the bloodline, for the entire bloodline of all humanity? That's always my focus, because I want something that it's going to benefit not only my kids, but it's going to benefit, Keke from the Ubuntu tribe in the middle of, Mozambique, wherever you happen to be from, or Vietnam or Laos or wherever you are. If you're a Homo sapien, living, breathing human being, you need to have this opportunity to save in a good monetary tool that's actually fair, uninflatable by politicians, incorruptible by thieves, unmanipulable by the banksters. And these bankster cartels, they're all interconnected, and they take advantage of the weakness of the people that are disorganized. Unfortunately, like, some people are not as developed as, the Japanese are very developed people, and they have their society age old. They have a very thriving thing. But can you imagine, can you imagine them on a Bitcoin standard? And it's happening. It's slowly, the adoption is being grassroots. It's starting from the very bottom, and it's amazing. It started from the bottom, right, with the plebs, and then it was like 5 people, and then 15 people, and then 30 people, and then one day it was 300, and then it exploded, and it was like 10,000 people, and then all of a sudden there are 1 million Bitcoin wallets, and now there are like 500 million Bitcoin wallets, right? And that might not be 500 million individual people, but we're getting there. Eventually it's going to be 1 billion people. And I like that analogy, that it takes the same amount of time for an innovation to get from 0% to 10%. It takes that same amount of time to get from 10% to 95%. So like the washer and dryer, the car, the motor vehicle, first it's gradual and it's really hard, like the first 15 years of Bitcoin. I think this is happening as we speak. The first 15 years of Bitcoin was like really tough. Bitcoin's a scam. Bitcoin's gonna die. You suck. You're an idiot. What are you doing? What are you saying? What are you saving your money in? You're crazy. It's a Ponzi scheme. You're gonna get rug pulled. And then all of a sudden, 15 years go by. We're at 5% adoption, and then another 5 years with 10% adoption. Now, to go from 10% adoption to 95% adoption, just like every other worldwide technological innovation that humanity adopted worldwide, same thing is going to happen to Bitcoin. And it's going to be like that. One day, 5 billion people out of nowhere are going to be using Bitcoin in some sort of like third or second layer, like Lightning or Liquid or Fediments. And, there are other applications being built on top of Lightning as well. So some form, I remember just waking up one day, I went to work, and, we were going to buy pizza in the ambulance station, right? And I'm like, oh, shoot, man, I don't carry any cash. Like, can I pay you later? And then my buddy was like, oh, you can just Venmo me. I'm like, what the hell's Venmo? I didn't know what Venmo was. Apparently, everybody else was using Venmo except me. So I didn't know what Venmo was from like overnight. We did not have Venmo, and now we have Venmo. And so he helped me download it, connect to my bank account, and I just paid him like $5 for the pizza immediately, instantaneously, right there. Even though it's not fully settled then, but at and people need to study more about the actual settlement of money. But anyways, I just downloaded Venmo. It's going to be just like that with Bitcoin. One day, people are not going to be using Bitcoin, and the other day, people are like 5, 6, 7 billion people worldwide are going to be using Bitcoin because it's inevitable. It's unstoppable. It's going to be in every iPhone, every tablet, every computer. It's going to be more convenient, and people are going to opt into it because people are sick and tired of banksters printing money out of thin air, willy-nilly, stuffing their pockets, and everyone who's around them, their family and friends who is around the money spigot, they're just turn on the money spigot, and they're having right there, they give us the crumbs that we get from the floors. The 8 billion people get the crumbs, and they all get they stuff their pockets, Citigroup, you mentioned it, JP Morgan Chase, all those giant private corporations that are in bed with the Federal Reserve. All of a sudden, people are going to be like, no, that's not a good future right there because you're devaluing my money. We're $36 trillion in debt. That's enough is enough. And people, individual, one by one, are going to say, I choose Bitcoin because it's the truth ledger in cyberspace and it's unmanipulable.
Dude, fucking love that. That's, I love the positivity. I think this is also, there was something you mentioned where I think like that is kind of like the bridge to perhaps more like the spiritual part, but it frees your mind so much once you kind of realize, I think, that you are, I want to say, unburdened by what has been. But I think it's that. Like once you realize that you're kind of like, there's no shackles and stuff like that. Yeah, like no one is manipulating the choices that you're trying to make within the freedom that you have, and I think that's just a very profound thing, at least for me. Like it makes me, I tweeted last week something like Bitcoin makes you stop running on the rat race and makes you start walking your own path or something like. I sent that to a few people and they were like, yeah, I really feel like that. And I felt like, oh, that's interesting, right? Because it clears your mind. It gives you space to think about the other stuff, or like what you mentioned, like how do I want to raise my children? What do I want to do when I'm older? Where do I want to go? Do I want to live here? Or is this what I want to do? Like all these, I want to say, questions open up that you can also create the time and space for to actually contemplate instead of just running the rat race because, well, but what you said in the beginning, right? The whole I need to pay my bills or else I will get kicked out or this and that or like there's no, you kind of get thrown into this when you're like younger, right? Yes. Or you did your study and then you start working and then you're like you fall into this thing that you never even observed or something, right? You're just
you didn't sign up for it either.
Yeah, you have no clue what you're actually participating in, Yep. And I think that was a big realization for me, realizing that I had no clue what I was participating in. And I think what really helped me is kind of like this, I don't know if it's Marcus or Radius, but like the thing of Epictetus. It's like once you know that you don't know everything, that really knowing that's freeing. Because then you can also play with that curiosity. Yes. You don't expect to get the 100% answer, right? So you keep an open mind for anything that crosses your path, good or bad, right? Like that's.
And this is why people are going to come into Bitcoin. It's not going to be an option for people. It's going to be subconscious for most of them. It's because Bitcoin is good, true, and beautiful, and people yearn for that. People yearn for beauty in their hearts, minds, and soul. They yearn for the good, the true, and the hopeful. Because hope is a very important thing if you want to have a happy life. You need hope. You need to work towards something that's worth it for you and for your kids. And Bitcoin is it. Bitcoin is that. Because now, all of a sudden, I wish people would understand everything is energy. The whole entire universe, there's either matter or energy. But even matter is not really matter. It's just energy compacted in different shapes and sizes. And, it's just everything is energy. Yes. Everything is atom, right? Neutrons, protons, electrons, and they're finding other types of energy and dark matter and dark energy. Everything is energy. And Bitcoin is the perfect way to channel said energy, right? I love that podcast with Michael Saylor that he did with Breedlove about, the civilization that best channels the energy wins. The hammer or I'm sorry, the sword trumps the rock, and the bow and arrow trumps the sword, and the gunpowder trumps the bow and arrow, and the bazooka. You always evolve in that. Bitcoin is the pinnacle of channeling, is the perfection, is a perfect monetary tool to channel energy between everybody in the world. It's connecting all of humanity together to exchange goods and services and grow together. That's what Bitcoin is. It's perfect.
Yeah. So now that you're so much into this, right? How do you experience talking to like our fellow millennials? Is it hard for you to to level, or do you feel the need to orange pill? Like I think something like once you adopt Bitcoin, it calls on something altruistic in you. Like as you said, I just want to wake or shake people up, right? Yeah. How do you feel about that now? Because I think I think it's a challenge. I mean, it's one of the main reasons that I started this podcast. Of course, I want to have us set an example of how we went through our own journey and thinking and adopting Bitcoin, right? But yeah, how do you experience that?
Yeah, I come from a perspective of, I feel a lot of empathy for people. I've always been very empathetic. I remember looking at, like watching shows on TV and seeing like a person who was homeless and didn't have anything to eat and like crying as a kid, like I've always had that empathy in my heart. So I come from a perspective of love. Whatever you do it out of love. Like, you are telling them about Bitcoin because you want them to have that positivity in their lives as well, and impart that throughout the globe. And that's because everything is interconnected, right? Mm-hmm. I shake your hand and you went to Miami, and in Miami you shook someone's hand whose cousin comes from China, and in China he shook the hand of somebody that comes from Vietnam. The whole world is interconnected together, and the internet connects us all together. I find that it's easy. It's frustrating sometimes because they don't see what you're seeing. So be patient. I love to tell people to read, the Bitcoin Standard. That's a big one. Please, please, please. I actually bought a bunch of copies. I left one at work and it disappeared. So I was very happy it disappeared because somebody took it and they didn't tell anyone because they're ashamed to say that they're studying Bitcoin, and it just disappeared out of nowhere. It was in the bookshelf at the ambulance station. It no longer was there. Good. And then I give one to my neighbor, and I also I send them the links on the phone. Like you can send there's the full audiobook on YouTube. You don't have to pay for it. It's completely free. Saifedean Ammous has a doctorate in economy. He's a very bright professor. Like, he's not just an average Mohammed out of the streets of Syria. No, he's an actual professor, an academic. He's so bright. The book is so complex. It teaches you anthropology, archaeology, human behavior, and through the ages also, like what we use for money back 10,000 years ago. We can find that through archaeological findings that we had, different. We found ledgers before, like in Egypt, like a bushel of grain for this much silver. There were ledgers that we actually find of people writing down. That's all Bitcoin is. It's a ledger that's immutable and unmanipulable. It's a ledger that records all transactions in cyberspace. That's why people say, oh my God, that's an overstatement. Immutable truth. What is that? Yes, it's the immutable truth, because you can etch your transaction in the ledger from wherever you are. If you happen to be in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, or if you happen to be in Switzerland, Italy, Europe, wherever you are, you can etch your transaction you can broadcast your own transaction, and it gets etched in the Bitcoin ledger forever and ever. So I find it easy to talk to millennials. I always try to be patient. It's hard sometimes because people at this point, people will just run from me because they're like, oh my God, here comes Gus. He's going to talk about Bitcoin. I talk about Bitcoin to everybody, to my coworkers, family, friends. It's all I talk about. Everyone knows, do not touch on the subject of Bitcoin, whether, or money or banking or anything like that, because I come from a perspective of just wanting what's best for humanity and for our children and for the future. I cannot express how happy I am now that I found Bitcoin. There's no words to describe the happiness that you feel. And that's the energy that it imparts. Not only that, but Bitcoin makes people productive. I remember working 40 hours a week, and that was that. I didn't do much, I just put a little bit of more 401k, and then my retirement account, maybe like $100 a week. But Bitcoin makes you more productive. Bitcoin makes you want to provide value to people. It makes you want to be productive. Whenever I clean houses or offices, the people get there, they're like, oh my God, this is beautiful. Like everything's so neat and clean and sanitary. It's safer. It's healthy now. They pay me and I get so happy. You feel fulfilled. And in turn, can you imagine that times a billion humans in the workforce? Now all of a sudden the builder is going to build an even beautiful but bigger cathedral or a house, like our architecture back in what happened to the architecture? Now it's just square buildings, like dead buildings, like vain and vague and kind of dark. Back in the days, you see those cathedrals, you're like, how did they build that in the 15th, 14th century? The buildings are amazing. It was the incentives.
Well, there's no courage or something. I think of the word courage, right? There's no courage to try something, new. But next to that, I think what you said sums it up perfectly. And I think I mentioned it a lot already in different conversations. It's like, whether you clean houses or are an EMT or you bake cookies or you are a teacher or it doesn't matter what you do or how you, put your energy and time to work to provide value, right? If you are happy doing that and you get the best reward to ever exist for that, or how to transform, probably the worst reward you can get into the best reward you can get, then it doesn't really matter what you do. I love that you use the word fulfilling. It's about that. That is that's the highest attainable thing. And then it doesn't really matter what you did for that, right? It's about achieving the gratification of your own work, basically.
Yep.
And that is more important than any amount of money or status or whatever. It's about achieving that feeling and recognition for yourself, I think. So I love that you mentioned that.
Meeting senior citizens on a daily basis, I meet I love meeting new people. I love the work that I do. It's nice. Sometimes it's not always bloodbath and it's not always people dying in the ambulance service. And I love meeting new people, going into their homes, helping them out, riding with them in an ambulance. And they tell you a lot of stories. And the senior citizens that are 90, 80, 100, they tell you that, you are not going to be thinking about when you're older, you're not going to be thinking about how many hours you worked or you're going to be thinking about how fulfilled you were and how happy you were with the memories that you generated with your family. That's what you're going to be thinking about. And you're going to be happy if you generated happy ones. And so once we have a better money, we can have more leisure time to spend with family and friends. Once we're not working ourselves to death for no reward, we're able to have a more leisure time to spend with family and make happy memories. And Bitcoin is that incentive that, the peace that you feel when you fulfill. So the word for peace in Hebrew, in the biblical, sorry to get biblical, but the Hebrew word for peace is shalom, and it comes from the word shalem, which means to be fulfilled. So when you build memories and you feel fulfilled, you feel certain inner peace in your heart.
Yeah.
And it generates different incentives for you to actually be a good person and work hard and be part of society and produce good things for other people.
Love that, man. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to ask you the last question, and which question that is, but I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go?
A core belief that I'll never let go. I think that it is the love for humanity that I will never let this go. Humanity is humans are a social creature. Social creatures, we like to be with each other. We like to cooperate. That's how, and, solitary animals don't build civilizations. Social creatures do. Look of what we've built We can do much more. We can and we will leave the planet, to colonize other habitable planets. This is obviously a million years into the future. I don't know. People didn't think we were going to fly for another million years from 1902, when then, 9 years later, the Wright brothers were flying. So you never know what innovation is going to come up. But the core belief I'll never, ever let go of is that if we treat other people the way we want to be treated and love humanity above all things, I think we can and will reach our goal, which is to grow more and more and love each other and be united. And Bitcoin is just that uniting factor, like music and dancing and language, like it unites people. Whenever you're walking around and somebody speaks your language, you're like, oh, I know that language, and you're talking and you're making friends and you're connected, so that's the core belief I'll never let go of. All humans are a family. That's why I say BTC fam. We are all a giant family. We share the same genetic trait, the DNA. It's all almost identical to each other with minor tweaks. And it's beautiful to see the wide variety of people that, you do people watch and you're like, oh, that's an interesting person, I want to talk to him. And you get curious. And that's the core belief I'll never let go of. Love humanity above all things, and love your neighbor as you love yourself, and treat others the way you want to be treated.
Awesome, man. I think that's a very positive ending to this conversation. I want to thank you so much. I'm happy we met. I'm happy we had this talk, and
thank you.
I'm grateful for having shared this time with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, brother. It's an honor. I'm going to continue to watch your podcast. And I always tell people, if you believe in something, if you want to share a message, please like, subscribe, give them a follow, a comment, because it triggers the YouTube algorithm or Rumble or whatever platform you're on. Please trigger the algorithm to share that Bitcoin message, especially when you have great guests on. I love the guests you have on. You're a heavyweight, man. You've had so many great people. So people like, share, subscribe, comment, and maybe even donate. Donate to what you believe in. Maybe $1 for you doesn't make any difference, but for him, if 10,000 people donate $1, he can continue to keep the podcast going. Thank you for having me, brother. Really a pleasure and an honor.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.